The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your financial advisor. Hey guys, my name is E, and this is Not Your Father's 2 Cents. As we continue to cope with higher prices, many are choosing to live a rent-first lifestyle. That's when someone chooses to rent goods and services as a personal choice. A recent Credit Karma survey found that more than 1 in 4 respondents are choosing to rent everything from vehicles to clothes, electronics, even furniture. Flexibility and the opportunity to save money and wanting to try things out first were some of the top reasons why people chose a rent-first lifestyle. Now, on the flip side of things, others equate renting to throwing away money, especially when it comes to big investments like home ownership. So how do you determine when it's best to rent versus buy? Joining me today is Darren Tooley. He is a loan officer with Union Home Mortgage, bringing more than 20 years of experience to the industry. So, Darren, what are your thoughts on a rent-first lifestyle? Do you think it's sustainable, or are there certain times that are better to rent than others?
I think it can be sustainable. I definitely believe that there are some things that are better owning than renting. You know, I have a real estate and mortgage background, so obviously I'm a firm believer that homeownership is one of the best wealth-creating tools out there today. You know, real estate as an investment has been one of the top funding things you can do year over year for, 60, 70 years. So I firmly believe that homeownership should be everyone's goal, but I understand that it's not something that is for everyone depending on the stage of their life that they're at. And there are definitely some things out there that, renting does make sense. I've never owned a vehicle. I've always leased a car.
Yeah.
I think renting in that scenario is great for me. It's a little more affordable. I'm not very handy when it comes to, cars. Heaven forbid something should go wrong. So leasing works for me and my lifestyle, when it comes to things like that. So I think it definitely can make sense for certain people. And there are some things that are better than others.
Yeah. So it probably definitely depends on like what it is that you're renting versus buying. Because like you said with cars, like I hear that example all the time when people were kind of having the conversation of, is it better to rent versus buy? And cars lose a good amount of their value as soon as you drive them off the lot. So in that case, yeah, that's like a great example of when, leasing, renting is a good option, especially now with like work from home. People may not even have to be driving as much as they were.
Or it can have really low miles on their leases and, make the payment even that much more affordable. So absolutely it can make sense. And, you talk to a lot of people, I've watched news stories or listened to blogs of, millionaires who talk about how they're still driving their, 1995 pickup because to them it doesn't make sense to invest in something else where they've got something that, is still running and meets their needs. So, everybody has their own opinion on it, but I think for most people in modern day, leasing a vehicle can definitely be a way to save, monthly, especially with other prices going up around them.
Going back to home ownership, in this survey, they found that 48% of people said they rent their homes because they can't afford to buy, and 24% say they rent because mortgage rates are too high to make buying worthwhile. What do you think about that?
Mortgage rates have gone up. There's no doubt about it. They're the highest that they've been in, probably over 20 years or were. They started to come down, and I believe will continue to go down, making things a little more affordable. When I talk to a lot of first-time home buyers, one of the misconceptions that I hear a lot is that it's unaffordable because they don't have the necessary down payment or they don't make enough money to qualify for the mortgage. Most people don't realize that you can buy a home with as little as 5% down. And if you're a first-time home buyer, you can buy a home with as little as 3% down. And as we've seen home prices go up over the last couple of years, the government has stepped in and offered a number of programs that offer grants for first-time home buyers. Some of them have income limits, so depending on how much money you may not. If you exceed the limit, you may not be eligible for the grant. Some are based on income criteria where it may impact how much of a grant that you receive. But either way, it does help make things a little more affordable. That can help with closing costs. It can give them discounted interest rates. So I think more people would be able to qualify, or we would be surprised at how little they may need to purchase a home or how little income they need as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Because I feel like a lot of people do think like, I don't make enough, with inflation and even just down to prices of groceries and everything. Like, how will I ever get to a point to where I can buy a home? I know that's like what a lot of people in my age group say specifically. Like, they just feel like they can't get there. If somebody has been renting for a couple of years and they're kind of on the fence about maybe buying a home for the first time, what should someone consider when making the choice between renting and purchasing a home? Because a lot of people also believe that, like, if you're renting your apartment, you're just throwing that money away.
You're 100% right. If you're renting, you're essentially paying someone else's mortgage for them. And there's data out there and studies have shown that the average net worth of a homeowner over the course of their lifetime is going to be 40 times the net worth of a renter. Most people, and most wealthy people especially, get the majority of their net worth, typically about 2/3 of their net worth, comes from the equity in their home. So if those who can qualify today but are renting and putting off buying, a year, 2, 3 from now, they may be saving a little bit, they think, in their monthly payment or how much their monthly expenses are. What they're not realizing is home prices will continue to go up. And when they do look to buy a home 2 or 3 years down the road, all that means is they're paying, 5 to 10% or more higher for that exact same home, which means that even if rates drop, it's not going to offset the higher price that they're going to pay.
Yeah.
And it's the lost equity they would have built, over that time. If you have a $300,000 home, that you could have bought and it's averaging, 1.7% appreciation a year, that home would be worth $367,000, potentially in 3 years. That's $67,000 in equity that they lost out on.
Have you seen like a decline in people wanting to purchase homes, or like what trends have you noticed, if any at all?
Yeah. No, I think the numbers are definitely down when you look at homes being sold over the last couple of years. A lot of that does have to do with home prices going up. Equally as important is the interest rates going up. A lot of people that were able to refinance, 2000, 2001, and 2002 even, are paying 2, 3, 4% on their mortgage, unless they are in a situation where they have to move due to a family or a job relocation, something like that. There's not a huge incentive for them to give up their 3.5% mortgage just because they want maybe a little bit nicer house to go all the way to a 7% interest rate.
Yeah.
So the numbers are definitely down from where they were, pre-COVID, but they are getting higher. They are going in the right direction. And as we continue to see rates go down even further, and, they were close to 8% at one point, then we got to 7%. Now we're right on the cusp of getting right around 6%. And most forecasts predict that they could be as low as the mid to low 5% range by the end of next year, if not sooner. Every 0.5% jump in interest rate, I think there's something like 2 million more people that will qualify for a mortgage that would not have qualified when the rate was 0.5% higher.
Wow.
So, I talk to people every single day that, they're just not having luck and they want to wait. The rate's still a little too high. The payment's a little bit more than what they'd like. They'll just wait for them to come down, which I understand it. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But what I try to explain to them is when rates continue to go down, all that means is more competition, more people that will be, pushing us back to where we were a couple of years ago, where, your offer wasn't even really considered unless you were at asking price, usually above and sometimes well above asking price, and then having to, maybe give up things like appraisal guarantees or forfeit an inspection, which is something I would never recommend. But people, in those 2001, 2002 years were doing drastic things to get their offer accepted. And as rates continue to go down, I think we're going to see more and more of those extreme circumstances where, just there's going to be so much more competition.
At what point should you consider buying if you've been renting for a little while? Like, is there a time where it's probably in your financial best interest to invest in a home instead of, just paying rent?
I think it depends on the individual person. I always tell you, I've been doing this a long time, and I have kind of my cliche sayings that I use over and over. And one that I tell all of my clients is the only mistake or the only regret I've ever made in real estate is selling a home. I think I bought probably 5 homes over my lifespan. I've always had to sell the current home to be able to afford and buy the new home.
Yeah.
I bought my first home right out of college in early 2006, right before, what the greatest, largest housing crisis that we've seen in this country. My home value, went way down. I ended up selling my home 11 years, I think, after I bought it. I still didn't make $1 on it. I think I actually came to closing, owing $1,000 or something like that. But had I have not sold that home is worth more than double what I bought for it, that home is worth more than double what I bought it for. And had I have not sold it when I did and was able to, I didn't make anything off of that sale. So if I just kept renting it out, and I always had good renters, and just not that I ever wanted to be a landlord,
right.
But had I have kept that home today, I'd be, instead of paying $1,000 to get rid of it, 15 years ago, now I'd have $300,000 or $400,000 or more of equity in the home to now sell it, or I could use that equity and borrow against it to invest in other homes, or do different things, pay off debt, whatever I'd be looking to do. So I think if you can hold the home long enough, you will always win. Home values have gone down something like 5 of the last 67 years or 68 years. And I think there's been 2 or 3 where they were flat. The other, whatever it is, 60 plus years that they've kept these statistics, home values go up. So even if you buy at the worst time like I did, as long as you can hold that home, and if you're not moving, you really don't care if the home value goes down. It's when you have to sell it that you might, it's only when you sell it that you might realize that loss.
Yeah.
But if you can hold the home long enough, you're always going to come out on top.
So maybe
sometimes it doesn't work that way, and you buy at the wrong time, and you have a job relocation, you have to sell. Sure, you can lose in real estate, but time has told us, and Warren Buffett was a huge proponent of it for a long time. The number one thing to invest in is real estate, because there's only so much of it.
I've also heard people kind of say, like, well, once you own a home, you're now reliable for all these repairs. And if things go wrong, and that can, get out of hand and surpass, you lose that benefit of, like, when you're renting, to just call and, hey, like, my sink's broken, fix it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. How should people maybe, like, weigh out that when they're, trying to determine what they should do?
It's a great question. That definitely is, you can know what your mortgage payment's going to be. You can plan on, some additional expenses, but you also need to account for that, and have a budget or a backup plan for those things that, you can't plan for or you don't anticipate. And, if you're buying a lot of first-time home buyers who are buying maybe a starter home and it may be a little bit older, sure, you need to plan on possibly having to get a new roof, within the first few years. You might have to get new windows, within the first couple of years. And those can be major, major expenses. So definitely things that you do want to consider. Not only, the hot water heater blows and, you might need something like that, but there are major items that can come up with home ownership that you need to consider when, based on things like the age of the home and, where it's located, weather related and whatnot.
Sharing my story a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 27. I'll be 28 in November, but I graduated college in 2019, moved home with my parents, and then saved up some money and lived with them for like a year and a half and commuted to my first job, which was in Lansing, and I live like south of Ann Arbor. So it was not, it was not a fun time. And then I moved to Florida right when COVID hit, and I rented down there for a year. I rented an apartment. And then I got a job in Detroit, so I came back here to Michigan, and I ended up renting for like a year and a half. And then my rent prices were going way up, more than what I could afford at that time. So I've moved back home again with my parents. Is this like, I know I have a lot of friends or just people that I've heard, even my mom says like other, parents that she works with are talking about like their adult children moving back home just because of the situation that we're in economically. Have you like encountered that a lot when you're working with clients?
Yeah, definitely. And especially, like you were saying, if you're going to be moving or anticipate moving or just want to move, you don't necessarily know where you want home to be for the next 3 to 5 years or longer. Definitely makes sense in those circumstances to rent versus buy, unless you want to, start a real estate portfolio. If you're in a college town, that can be a great time to, if you can get like a 2 to 3 unit rental, because you can still live there. You can have, 1 or 2 roommates living with you, helping pay essentially what is your, they're helping you pay your mortgage. And then typically in college towns, there's an endless supply of renters year after year after year. So those can be great investments. And I've seen a lot of younger people or just out of college do that, but it's not for everyone. Not every, 23, 25, 28-year-old wants to be a landlord and, deal with something that happens on a home in Ann Arbor, Michigan at 1:30 at night when they're living in Florida and trying to, have their own life. So it's definitely the decision and something you have to be firmly believe in and want to do. But I think someone like yourself that was or intends to move around, renting is definitely the way to go. And I think we see more and more of that. I didn't necessarily want to buy a house right out of college. And I'm 43, so this is, 20 plus years ago. But at the time, I had an older sister who was still living at home. My brother is also older and had moved out, right out of college and they rented and did their own thing. But when I graduated, moved back home, was starting a job, planned on living there for a year or two. And, my brother basically talked me into buying a house, in Howey, Michigan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, where that is, but, it's kind of by Flint. I was living in Royal Oak at the time. All my buddies lived in Royal Oak. We went out in Royal Oak. Exactly. Yeah. I looked at homes in Royal Oak for about 30 minutes and realized there was nothing I could afford there. So, my brother, who I've always looked up to, kind of with his guidance and, decided to buy a house out in Howey with him. Well, I'm now an hour away from where all my friends are. And I still, if I could do it all again, I probably wouldn't have bought. But when I did it, I go back to, I held it for 10 years. I bought it at the absolute worst point in time that you could, obviously not knowing. So when I made the purchase, I did everything wrong. I did a 80% first mortgage, a 20% second mortgage. So I literally had no equity in the home. I did interest-only payments because it was all I could afford, because I was 6 months out of college, didn't have a down payment, was first-time job, wasn't making, great money.
Right.
But all that being said, I did find a way to get through it. I did have renters in there for 10 years, I sold it at the first chance where I felt at the time I could get out of it, and I didn't make anything, but I didn't lose anything, or I wasn't losing anything further.
I think that's a good testament to, it's not the end of the world necessarily if you live and learn, right? Like you made it out fine. But I think a lot of people do put a lot of pressure on that. Like even kind of speaking for myself, like I'm at a point now to where I know, my family's in Michigan, and really the only reason why I moved to Florida was just for career advancement. Like it was a year and a half out of college. And like you said, like not making a lot of money and stuff like that. It got to, I was just trying to move my way up the ladder. But now that I'm kind of back home where my family is, relatively speaking, how does someone like me I know that I want to buy a home. I guess I just don't know like how to go about it, because I also made like a career change too. So like my savings isn't where what news didn't pay. I mean, I don't, it just did not pay at all. So it's just
and there's a lot of jobs that underpay. That's for sure.
How much, maybe, like, I guess what would be the first steps for somebody who maybe they just got a new job and they're, kind of moving back in with mom and dad for a little bit, but they know like, I want to live in this area. I see myself working here for a while. What steps should they take maybe to start like becoming getting on the path to home ownership?
Yeah, great question. And I think I like the way you put it, the path to homeownership, because you don't necessarily have to wait or even want to wait till the moment you're ready to buy to talk with somebody, for the first time about what it takes to qualify for a mortgage. Some people may need months to prepare for a number of reasons. They may need credit issues fixed. They may need to build up for, savings. They may need to pay down some debt to qualify. So what I would always recommend is speak with a mortgage professional that comes recommended. Talk to family who have worked with somebody if they like to recommend it. Talk with some, friends who recently bought a home and, like the person that they worked with or recommended. And if you don't have somebody that, has a good recommendation, or you don't feel comfortable doing that, do research online. I firmly believe that you should be looking at the reviews of certain companies and lenders, but also the specific loan officers, because I've been doing this 20 years. I've worked at companies that I would probably never work at again, but there were some great loan officers there. I've worked at a couple of companies that I could not speak more highly of. I loved the people. I loved everybody there, but there were some loan officers who, I wouldn't want my family working with them for one reason or another.
Yeah.
So reviews, I think, are important. If you can't, find someone that comes highly recommended from someone that you trust, and then start having the conversation. Like I said, people would be surprised. I find people are surprised with how little cash they may need for closing costs and a down payment, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, and even if you're not, you can buy with as little as 5% down conventional and 3.5% down FHA. There are grants out there for $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. Some are $10,000 to also help with down payment and closing costs. Some of those have to be paid back. Some of them don't have to be paid back. So there's a number of programs out there like that, and more. What I found over the years more people qualify for a lot more than they think they would.
Really?
Qualifying is one thing. Yeah, people are shocked sometimes. I see it both ways, where people, make not a lot of income and they don't understand why they can't qualify for, a $600,000 or $700,000 home, and we try to have that conversation and explain that to them.
Yeah.
But I would say far more times that, somebody comes to me and they tell me the scenario and I go through everything and like, well, do I qualify? Like, well, yeah, you applied for a $400,000 home. I can get you into an $800,000 home if you wanted to. You qualify for that. Now, there's a big difference between qualifying and what are, you as the potential homeowner comfortable with. What payment are you comfortable with? Because the thing I don't know when I'm qualifying somebody, I don't know, what your social life is like. I don't know what outside family obligations, things like that you have. I know what the mortgage payment would be. I know what shows up on your credit report.
Right.
For the most part, anything outside of that is none of my business. So, so I can tell people what they qualify for, but it's up to, having a conversation with each applicant and, whether it's refinancing or buying, with what their goals are, what payment are they comfortable with, and then catering, okay, well, here's what price range you'd want to be at. Here's kind of the down payment to give you an idea of what to expect and make sure that meets their comfort level and what they're able to come up with.
I like that you say all that, because I think even like for me, I'm like, well, I'm just trying to build an emergency fund at this point, like I haven't had the opportunity to put money aside for a house. So I kind of have just felt like it's out of reach for me for the foreseeable future. I do want to get to a point to where, because I see home ownership as an investment, like in most cases, the values go up and you can sell it for a lot more than what you paid for it down the road, or it's something I can just hang on to, and who knows, like that could just be my forever home, So I think it's good to know that there's options out there, because I always hear a lot of people in my generation, say, "Oh, my parents paid $20,000 for their home, and now I got to pay six figures for the same house. Like I'm never going to get there." But maybe that's not really the case. There might be programs and things that can help you get to that point.
There definitely are. And there are programs, there's a program called USDA, which is, as long as you're buying in a home that the state deems as a rural area, and there's literally a website in the map, you can plug in a property address and it will tell you, yes, it's eligible, or no, it's not, where you can do 0% down. And, VA loans, for example, if you're a veteran and qualify, you can do 0% down financing. But with USDA, you don't have to be a veteran. You don't have to have, there's any real requirements other than there are some income requirements that you can't exceed a certain income limit. But as long as you're buying a home in an eligible area, you don't need to have a down payment. And if you're able to find a home that appraises for more than what you're buying it for, which you'd be surprised, even in this market with home values going up, does still happen, you could, in theory, come to closing with nothing and not have to bring any cash to close, or as little as 1% with some of the other down payment and grant programs that are out there. So it's definitely worth a conversation. And even if you're not necessarily ready to buy right now, you can still kind of know what's out there, get an idea of what a payment range would look like, and at least then start to put together like a monthly budget. If you do need to save for a down payment, and okay, here's what I want my payment to be. In order to meet that payment, here's how much I would have to put down, and having a professional that can help you work backwards with those numbers, I think can help you get to where you ultimately want to be. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
What would your 2 cents be when it comes to somebody just considering whether they should rent or buy? Should they take into account their lifestyles, their spending habits, maybe like when it comes to even a car, like their commute to work? Is it feasible to lease? Is it better to buy, given how much you're driving? What's kind of your 2 cents? I know it's different items, but what are your, when you hear the rent versus buy argument, I guess, like where do you stand on that?
I 100% agree with what you just said. There are definitely some good services, products out there that it makes more sense to rent than buy. Typically, I've always found if it's something that you will have for, the longer you're going to have something, you're better off buying it. I never wanted a car for 5-10 years. I get bored with it. When things start to break down, I wouldn't know how to fix it. Leasing makes sense for me.
Yeah.
Real estate, a mortgage, if you're going to live in the home for 2-3 years or longer, unless, again, you plan on moving often, but if you plan on being there 2-3 years or longer, financially speaking, buying would far outweigh the benefits of renting. Yes, you may save a little bit in rent, but as you mentioned earlier, rent prices on average go up more than home prices do. And when I hear a lot of people talk about how affordability, homes are becoming less affordable nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really not necessarily the case. If you look at a home today that's $375,000, and you're putting 20% down, so you're getting a $300,000 mortgage. You look at what that payment is now, and then let's say that home appreciates 7% a year from now, and the amount of money you put the same 20% down, the difference in the payment, you're talking maybe $125 a month. That your payment has gone up over time. Right now, if you look at hourly or week over week wages, they're going about 5.9% per year. So home affordability, when you look at it as the payment of the mortgage compared to the income that you're getting, it's actually becoming more and more affordable because on average, people are making more and more money. We just see the home price is higher today than it was yesterday, and it's going to be higher a year from now than it is today. But that doesn't necessarily mean things are becoming it doesn't necessarily mean things are becoming less affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think you don't see that piece of it, right? That, people were making more money than they did. You have to kind of consider cost of living compared to incomes and all of that before you can say, it's not affordable for me to get a home,
Absolutely. And that's one piece of the puzzle. That's looking at what the home or, what the mortgage payment is compared to the income increase. Things are actually becoming more affordable. That doesn't take into account, like you said, inflation on other products where, those prices have gone up. It doesn't include everything else around you. Credit card debt is at the highest level it's ever been in this country. So people have racked up credit cards as inflation has gone up. Groceries have gone up. So there are other things that have made, living less affordable. But strictly when it comes to home ownership, it actually is getting more affordable when you look at it compared to, the increase in average wages over, year over year.
Yeah. Well, this was great. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about all of this.
Thank you. It was very nice meeting you.
Yes, you too. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
That does it for this edition of Not Your Father's 2 Cents. Sources used in this episode will be linked in the description, along with a link to Darren's website where you can check him out. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week.